Oh my god, guys, Rubina is coming back tomorrow. Rubina is she's my best friend and she's also the house help. Now I can finally go back to living like an entitled brat. That's the dream. Rubina, I love you. Alright, guys, the next episode is with a dear guest from Pakistan, and I didn't know that I could, get him. And thanks a lot to Vishal Sinha and Asad Bhai for helping me get him. And he talks about Pakistan. He talks about his journey. I don't know, like you have to watch the whole episode. We've spoken about so many things, and it's just beautiful. Watch it, watch it, watch it. Also, guys, please subscribe. Please subscribe. It takes a lot of effort. It genuinely does. Subscribe, share. Like, if you like it, and I don't know how. I want 100 likes. I don't know how. I just want 100 likes.
Hey guys, maybe I should start a podcast.
No.
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 मेरे सामने वाली सरहद पे कहते हैं दुश्मन रहता है, पर गौर से देखा जब उसको वो तो मेरे जैसा दिखता है. मेरे सामने वाली सरहद पे कहते हैं दुश्मन रहता है, पर
Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another episode of Fun with Law. And I really didn't know that I would take this podcast so far because this is the most exciting episode that I've ever recorded. I have Mr. Muhammad Adil Chatta joining me from Lahore, Pakistan. And today he's going to talk about law in Pakistan and how is it being a lawyer in Pakistan. And obviously we'll crack a few jokes about India, Pakistan. And he's an alumni of Lahore University of Management Sciences and currently is practicing with Amjad Parvez Law Associates. Also, guys, I think I should tell you that Adil Bhai has got into Columbia, Berkeley, and I'm sure his phenomenal judicial activism was one of the way through he got into those colleges. But hearty congratulations, and he's one of the most brilliant young legal minds in Pakistan, and I'm so glad to have him. And he's been gracious enough to join us through Pakistan during these tough times, and I think Ramzan is going on, so yeah. And thanks a lot, Adil Bhai. And I think
Welcome, Jay. Welcome, Jay. How have you been?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah. How's the COVID lockdown been?
There's no lockdown for the judiciary,
All right.
and there was a lockdown for the entire country, but not for the courts, which is quite strange. But we will talk about that, I think.
Yeah. But Adil Bhai, I think before beginning this episode, I think you need to tell us something, and you need to tell my audiences. So, whenever India में जब भी हम politics में या whenever we ask politicians any questions, and then we say why are we living here and what is so wrong, they just ask us to go to Pakistan. That you should go there and live there, and if you're so anti-national. So is that the case in Pakistan too? Even they tell you go to India whenever something bad happens?
Not that often, but yes. But they do say if you are complaining a lot that you are probably an Indian agent or things like that.
Yeah, that's true, man. But I think you should tell that, like people keep saying go to Pakistan. It's not like Pakistan is accepting unlimited immigrants from India. Like it's not like कि हम जाएंगे और आप हमें ले लेंगे.
Me, but you'll make a good case if you try to come to Pakistan in the International Court of Justice.
Oh, you see that. All right. I think I'll get coffee flack for that. But all right. So let us begin. Our knowledge about Pakistan in India basically comes from 3-4 things. Number one is Fawad Khan. Number two is Coke Studio. Yeah, exceptional music. My father loves listening to Qawwali and Rahat Fateh Ali Khan and things like that. And then now third knowledge also comes from the Pakistani serials that my mom watches, because like my mom, obviously the older generation doesn't have the best things to say about the country and things like that, and they will just say anything very rash, and suddenly when I walk into the room she will be secretly watching a Pakistani TV show because it's so good. So how's the image of India in Pakistan? Is there a lot of hatred, or how's it?
I think there's a lot of following of Indian TV shows in Pakistan as well.
Okay.
So the Saas Bahu drama, where one single scene can continue for like 20 minutes, and so
Yeah.
there's a lot of that in Pakistan going as well, and especially for the people who have got lots of time, and
Yeah.
since these serials are very long, they continue for days at end,
Yeah.
and so there are a lot of people who watch that very regularly and like that, and the way jewelry is shown in those
Yeah.
shows. So
Yeah.
there's a quite a bit of following of that.
Yeah.
Other than that, you see, I think the news on both sides works the
Uh-huh.
same way. Uh,
Yeah.
if you, there
Yeah.
are few Indian channels who are moderate, there are few Indian channels who are a bit extremist when it comes to Pakistan, and
Same. Yeah.
similar is the case in Pakistan. There are few TV channels who
Yeah.
want a friendship sort of a relationship with India. There are few
Yeah.
channels who say, "How dare you talk about India like that in a friendly manner?"
Yeah.
And so I think it is very much similar if we look at the shows at both ends.
आई थिंक बट आदिल भाई मैं आपको एक बात बताना चाहूंगा क्रिकेट में हम जीत गए क्रिकेट में तो हम आई थिंक वी वन बट म्यूजिक में यू वन बट आई
Okay,
थिंक
Virat Kohli.
no but I think in music you won you guys won I think
Again,
uh,
I think what you're saying about the music, I think even after that, there's a lot of room for Pakistan to improve in terms of the training institutes that we have for young musicians.
yeah
And I think India में बड़ा एक academies का बड़ा अच्छा system है. पाकिस्तान में it is just a generation by generation thing mostly,
yeah
और उस किस्म का एक institutional framework नहीं है. लेकिन
yeah
इसके बावजूद if our singers are performing good, it hats off to them that they're managing it so well.
yeah that's true no when I contacted you you knew who Arnab Goswami was and you know I think you're quite well versed with Indian pop culture and that's good man that's great uh, but also one
Yes,
sorry go ahead
please continue.
no I was saying that you know also there's a image of Pakistan in India that you know there's a lot of disparity because when we look at certain you know rich Pakistani people you see you know a lot of classy people very gracious you know very big hearted pretty and you know that's the and you see so that's the image that we have that there's a lot of poverty in Pakistan or there are a lot of rich people like they don't have a thriving middle class is that the case or is it completely misunderstood
First of all, I don't think so. I can comment on that with much certainty, other than for what I know from my personal experience.
yeah
I think there's a thriving middle class in Pakistan, and because I'm not an economist, I've not done any surveys on that, so I can't comment on that with full certainty. But I think there's a similar notion about India and Pakistan. There are documentaries which show okay, Mumbai ki ek side pe there is this big buildings and all, and
yeah
the other side of Mumbai there is this
yeah
slums and all. So I think the both countries need to focus on the issue ke
yeah
how this poverty needs to end.
yeah
And I think that should be the main concern rather than pointing out to the other country that this is going on and this is going on.
That's true. That's
So,
true. No, my uncle went to Karachi on business 3-4 years back, and I asked him. I said, "How was Pakistan?" You know, and we were scared. We thought ki we were going to Pakistan, something wrong will happen. He came back and we asked him how was Karachi. He said Bombay jaisa hi tha. It was good. Like it was a good city. And I remember I was at Wagah border, and I think Amritsar and Lahore are just like 40 to 50 kilometers away. And
yes.
I remember and I feeling I don't know I felt बहुत अजीब लग रहा था दिल को पता है बहुत ऐसा लग रहा था like why like all these feelings that why did this happen and things like that and so is it also is there a sentiment in so in India you know there's a sentiment you know Akhand Bharat we'll get Pakistan back or things like that in Pakistan is there is there any feeling of such sort कि no we'll get Bangladesh back or things like that
नहीं यार आई डोंट थिंक सो देयर इज एनी सच
yeah
फीलिंग आई थिंक वो इंडिया में भी ऐसी फीलिंग कोई नहीं है वो स्वामी साहब का मैं एक इंटरव्यू देख रहा था वो ही वाज सेइंग कि जहां मुस्लिम्स की पॉपुलेशन 30% ऊपर चली जाती है तो बहुत मसला करते हैं so I don't think so they're very much interested in getting Pakistan back and getting a load of more Muslim population on them
oh god
who are going to then change the politics of the country and do a lot of other things
yeah
so I think that is only just to help their politics. Such statements
Yeah,
are just to help their politics and nothing more.
yeah, that's true.
It helped BJP a lot, to saying that we'll get this, we'll get that, we'll
Yeah.
do this. So
आप मेरे एपिसोड में अब देखिए कितने कमेंट सेक्शन में इतनी गालियां खाऊंगा मैं. It's going to be horrendous. Uh, can you tell us about your journey? Why did you choose law? And how was your law school and what you're doing right now and things like that?
So I was interested in politics from quite an early age.
Yeah,
When I was in grade 7, I thought that I would become a politician.
yeah,
And then I used to read about all these political leaders who were all of them were lawyers. And I
yes.
thought that
Or
law
cricket
would make a
players.
very good.
Or cricket players.
Or, yes, now cricket players as well. Cricket players were not that prominent when I was growing young.
Yeah,
So So I thought that law would make a very good combination to go with politics, and it is also not that you have to give all your time in the constituency. You can do your legal work, and then you can also um, be on the political table as well.
yeah,
So I think that is something that brought me to law initially, and my family wanted me to go to some engineering school, but then I forced my way into law school, and that is how I came to Lance.
So you spoke about how your parents wanted you to become an engineer, and is that still a thing in Pakistan? Because in India it's also quite a big deal that if your child doesn't choose science in his around 11th and 12th grade, then it's a problem for parents or like society in general. So is that the same case?
I think it depends. Like there are two types of people who generally do law in
Yeah,
Pakistan. The first type is either they can have their uh, fathers or uncles or grandfathers-in-law, or they are the type who don't want to do anything but the law. People like me, I think. And secondly, there are people who cannot do anything but the law.
yeah,
So so these are the two types. So yes, so
yeah,
if you are in the middle of these two types and you want to do law, so there will be some
yeah,
pressure from the family that you should
yeah,
probably consider some sciences or something like that. But then if you are too passionate, then there's nothing that can stop you.
yeah, yeah,
And I think LUMS was a wonderful place. We had a 5 years program there, and the first 2 years we took courses from all different disciplines, from sciences, from the management school, from humanities and social sciences. And I think that made the foundation on which my further legal training
yes,
came upon. And I think those 2 years were very helpful for me to uh, set a groundwork for my legal training.
yes,
And then when I moved to law school with that sort of a training in social sciences, in humanities, in few areas of business and uh, physical sciences, so law school was a wonderful experience for me because at our law school, first of all, there were like these big names who, like the former Chief Justice of Pakistan, Justice Jordan Khwaja was our teacher. Similarly, all these big authorities in Pakistan were at our law school since it is the best in the country. So and
and
it helped
now
a lot.
yeah, and now you're working with a law firm, right?
Yes.
So how's the law firm culture there? Are there any like big 3, 4 tier one law firms, or they're like small establishments in each cities?
So in Pakistan, the major uh, legal work is done in three main cities: Lahore, Islamabad, and Karachi.
All
And
right.
all these cities have their own different specialities, you can say. For example, Karachi is more famous for corporate law, for commercial law,
Yeah.
and Lahore is more heads-on in constitutional law.
Yeah.
So and similarly, Islamabad is for transactional law
Okay.
because all the competition law, all the agencies who deal with these things are based there. And Karachi, since it is the financial hub, so more of the transactional and corporate commercial work is done there. And Lahore is the place to be for the constitutional law.
Yeah.
So there is this aspect, but then there is all the legal when you go to the law firms, it is mainly two types of structures. One is a chamber-based system where there's a big lawyer who's heading the firm, and you can come and practice with him for a few years, and then you have to go out and establish maybe your own law firm or
Yeah.
start your own practice. And then there's a recently developing firm culture where if you get in, you can rise to the top in the very same firm, and you don't have to leave that firm. You don't have
Yeah.
to go out. You don't have to establish your own office. I think the firm culture is now rapidly growing in Karachi.
Yeah.
It is pretty much established in Karachi.
Plus, it's very high
And
paying also, right?
let me come to that. So, but in Lahore, I think the firm culture is still not that strong, but it is developing, and it is developing at a good pace. And
Yeah.
in Islamabad, it is also developing. And if you talk about the pay, I think the most chambers, I was lucky to get paid in both the chambers that I worked at. But most chambers, they generally, even if the senior lawyer is getting millions for a case, he is not very much interested in paying his juniors, so they don't
Yeah.
generally get paid at all. Even if they are masters from Harvard or Yale or from wherever they come, they have to work initial few years without getting a penny. So that is how the chambers
It's
generally
similar.
work.
I think it's similar in India. Like we'll get like many minimum, like 20,000-25,000 rupees. But that's the similar case in India when it comes to chambers and law practice. I think it's because of it's called the colonial hangover, right? Because we have originated from the same system. And interestingly, when you talk about Lahore, when we go to the old, like I was in the Delhi High Court library and things like that, we still have Lahore High Court books, AIRs, and the cases from 1930s and 40s, and sometimes they're still cited because
Yes.
yeah, and it's very interesting. So now talking about law schools, we'll talk about your experience, how, and you have been part of some substantial phenomenal cases also. Can you tell me about how the law school curriculum, or the is this, or so do you have, for example, in India we have a network of national law schools where all the top law schools of the country set up by the government. There's a centralized examination. What's the system in Pakistan? Do you have similar top universities, or is it like separate for everyone?
I think we have generally like 3/4 systems in Pakistan.
Okay.
So we have a similar sort of a system for medical school, so what you were talking about, but
Yeah.
not for law school. So there is a lot of students who do the external law while sitting in Pakistan, the UK-based law, which is called.
Hmm.
So it is affiliated with the University of London. They are in Pakistan, but the examinations are carried out by the British Embassy. So there is that. Then there is Sharia law,
Okay.
which is taught at one or two universities, and it focuses on the Pakistani law and on the Sharia law aspects, on the Arabic, on the different texts in Sharia law. There is that. But then most commonly all universities, the main universities who have a BA, LLB program, who have an LLB program uh, approved by Pakistan Bar Council and Punjab Bar Council, they take their own examination.
Okay.
So my university, and they can be both private universities and public universities.
Yeah.
My university is a private university, and I think it has the highest of the standards. If you talk about that, as I told you, the curriculum that we were following, the cases from all the different jurisdictions, the teaching method, the faculty, the research that was being carried out at our university. But otherwise, I think generally there is also this one thing which resulted in lowering the standards of the bar and in the legal community a lot, which is that the private universities can then get affiliations with different colleges, and if you get admitted to one of these colleges,
Yeah.
you don't need to study much for law. The passing marks are around 40%. You will have an annual examination, and you
Yeah.
get through only by paying money and doing nothing much. You'll
Yeah.
get like these 10-20 questions guide at the end of the year, and you'll read them and you'll get through. And that has resulted in a bar which is very political, where people don't have much knowledge to practice law, so they depend on making strong groups and pressurizing your judiciary and doing
Yeah.
things like that. But recently, there was a case in the Supreme Court where the Supreme Court ordered a commission, and the commission then formulated its report and handed it back to the Supreme Court. And from there on, the Supreme Court ordered
Yeah.
that there should be an admission test for all the law schools in the country, either they are private or public or the Sharia law. And once you graduate from that law school, you have to again give a test at the bar, and that test is now going to be rather strict from the test that used to be previously there, where there were no standards and it was an easy test, and you could even pass it if you have political support in the bar. Now that test is will be a difficult test. It will be of few different subjects that you will have to answer questions from,
Yeah.
and it will also have a higher passing marks.
Yeah.
So that is how things are now. Things are improving. Furthermore, the Supreme Court also banned the 3 years program, uh, because most of the graduates that that program was producing were not up to the mark and were not law knowing, because people would just pay and get the degree and get to the bar, and
Yeah.
the standards in bar falling a lot. So I think there has been this improvement in the previous years. But
Yeah.
as far as this now the current uh, law schools are concerned, there are three different types. The who do the foreign law, but now they have to do a special course for Pakistani law after they graduate. This
Yes.
was also from the Supreme Court decision. Then there's Sharia law, and then there's local law, which is done both by public institutions and private institutions who get an
Okay.
affiliation from Pakistan Bar Council. So yeah, this is the case.
So also, is it common for Pakistan law students to go abroad? I mean, do you hear that a lot? Because there's also an image that I think probably through media that we have, that a lot of Pakistani youth wants to go abroad. Either they come back or they settle there. But there's a persona. Is it true?
I think a lot of the elite, the
Yeah.
students who get taught in these elite institutions go abroad for either bar, their LLM,
Yes.
and most of them do come back. And the persona that you were talking about, I think we're quite jealous of Indians about that, because uh, Pakistani generally think that Indians are way more in most of the countries, and they're
Well, we are
migrated
more
there.
in number. We are more in number.
Oh,
So I think in general, the more like
yes.
yeah. So we will be there. But yeah, fair enough. Also, you so also do you so is there still a barrister persona in Pakistani legal community? Or people are more interested in academic studies like LLM now?
I think the barrister persona is there to some extent, but it is now more common in the general public
Okay.
or in the district bars. But when it comes to high court or the most senior most lawyers, I think it doesn't really matter to them, and they are more interested in if someone has an academic qualification,
All right.
because that is what tells them something about you, that you can do something, you can achieve something, rather than the cup of bar. So
Yeah.
yes,
Now, we'll talk about, because a lot of interesting cases that you've been part of. So you recently was a part of a constitutional case, and it's quite celebrated also. So could you elaborate on that?
um, actually in Pakistan it is much different from India. In India, I think recently when you graduate from law school, you after just some time you can become an advocate of the Supreme Court. It
Yeah.
is not the same in Pakistan. In Pakistan, for the first 2.5 years, you're only advocate of the lower courts,
Okay.
and you can't even practice in the higher court. And after 2 years, 2.5 years of practice, you get an interview with a judge of the high court, and then you get a license for the high court. And
Yes.
then after that, after 7, 8 years, even 10 years in some cases,
Yeah.
you have to have certain reported cases which you produce before a committee. You are interviewed on your knowledge of law, and only then, and the committee comprises of 3 judges of the Supreme Court, and
Okay.
once they approve you, only then you become an advocate of the Supreme Court. So when Mr. Imran Khan came to power, he appointed one of his friends as his special assistant, with the status of Minister of State. And I was a bit astonished at that. I never thought that Imran Khan could do anything like that.
Yeah.
So I was graduated from law school a year back. I thought that it is a good opportunity to go to the Supreme Court as a petitioner in person, which meant that I would file the petition myself and that argued myself before the Supreme Court. And I did that. So our first hearing was before the Chief Justice in his chambers, and then later on, a full bench of the Supreme Court heard that petition in great length. And my opposing counsel, and in that case, the Supreme Court even issued a notice to the Prime Minister. So that happened for the first time in the history of the Pak country. A notice in the name of the Prime Minister Imran Khan.
Yeah.
So my opposing counsel in that case was Barrister Itazaz Hassan, who is the foremost lawyer in the country, and he was from Zulfi Bukhari, and my other opposing counsel was the Attorney General of Pakistan. He used to be there himself in the all the hearings of the case. He, not even once I saw that an additional Attorney General or an Assistant Deputy Attorney General was there. The Attorney General used to be there himself in the case because it was, I think, a very important case for the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
So I had challenged the appointment of Zulfi Bukhari on the grounds that he is not qualified to be a parliamentarian, and in a system of parliamentary democracy, someone who is not uh, eligible to become a parliamentarian cannot be given status of Minister of State. And something that cannot be done directly must not be done indirectly. The Supreme Court heard the case at length, and at the end, the Supreme Court gave a detailed judgment, and it was a good experience being at the Supreme Court, addressing the full bench, a bench of three judges of the Supreme Court, and being with the foremost against the foremost counsel of the country. Yes.
That is I don't know. But is it normal? Like, I think you did something extraordinary there. But is it normal to? So in India we have something called public interest litigations.
Yes.
So through those we can file petitions, and if we have such concerns, and if it affects the public interest and public at large, we can approach the court. So was it the similar case in Pakistan?
Yes, it was, I think, a similar case. It was the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court under 184(3) of the Constitution. And at this stage, you have to show the two different parts to the Supreme Court. First, that it is a matter of public importance, and second, that it affects the human rights of general public. So, first, this test is met only then Supreme Court starts hearing your case and going forward from there on.
All right. And also, you have worked with the Pakistani Muslim League N, which was founded by your ex-Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, and you have also, worked on his cases. So, I know if you really can't talk about it, that's fine. But if you could elaborate,
I can. I think the Muslim League has been there since time immemorial, since 1906.
Yeah.
And after the Pakistan came into being, it got divided into different factions, and those factions started working on their own, and the leadership kept changing. And after 80s, Mia Nawaz Sharif was the president, and then he contested a number of elections from that party. I was there. I contributed to the manifesto of the party, to the chapter of legal reforms and a few other chapters. And then I was also there in the anti-rigging cell. And I think it was a fantastic experience working with a political party at that level, at this age. And I think it also helped me understand how political parties were, so we were coordinating with the senior-most leadership of the political party for the matters, and the anti-rigging cell was working in the entire country. So it was a fantastic experience looking at how political parties do their working, and they are not in front of people on the back end, what goes in the back end. It was a fantastic experience. So in my legal practice, I first joined a firm, Asim Hafiz Law Associate, where I was working on the banking cases, mostly the banking trials, and few high court cases that were mostly constitutional. But when my senior, Mr. Asim Hafiz, got elevated to Lahore High Court, and he became a justice, so then I moved to this office with Mr. Amjad Pervez. This is a very small office. We have like 2 associates and he himself, and we manage all this work. So at this office, I worked at a lot of big cases, which include the case of Mia Nawaz Sharif, ex-Prime Minister Chaudhry Shujat Hussain, ex-Prime Minister Mia Shehbaz Sharif, ex-Chief Minister Chaudhry Pervez Elahi, ex-Chief Minister
So you were the
Mia
defense
Manzoor
counsel.
Bhutto. Yes, we were defense counsel. Mia Manzoor Bhutto, ex-Chief Minister,
Yeah.
many federal ministers, many senior bureaucrats, and
Yeah.
many big businessmen. So I think since this firm is probably the best law firm in the country when it comes to the issue of white collar crime or accountability law. So I
Yes.
think all these people although from different political parties, used to trust our office for that sort of work.
Yeah. But is it hard to get justice on in such high profile cases? Because if I'm not wrong, because such cases can be highly political driven, and so is it tough?
I think it is both tough to do justice to these cases and to get justice in these cases
Okay.
because even if these cases are politically motive or if even if there are things like that, see, lawyers can't lack because of that thing. They have to be fully prepared, and
Yeah.
fully prepared in these cases mean that there should not be a single. My senior told me that when you do legal research, there should not be a single case that you should leave, which an opposing counsel can find, or which any other counsel in the country can
Yeah.
find that you don't find. So all the cases should be on our table, and we should be prepared for all the arguments that may come from the opposing side. And that was very challenging doing that on each and every question,
Yeah.
especially when we're doing with these many trials and they're working on a weekly basis. So it was very challenging. We used to be go to office at 8 in the morning,
Yeah.
get back home at 11 at the night, sometimes even late. With very few sleeping hours, we used to go back to the office again and start working again. And it was very hectic experience going to the court in the morning. Then when you're back, there are clients. Then after the client, you start drafting or researching and doing work on the cases. So
Yeah.
it was you were on the go all the time in these cases. So that is very challenging aspect of these cases.
But obviously, I understand. You know, like a lawyer's job is, I think, a lot of people don't understand, but it's about representing a client. It's about keeping your personal biases aside and just finding the legal aspect of that case and presenting it to the judge. Then it is on the judge to decide. However, your affiliation with PMLN, which was founded by Nawaz Sharif, so weren't you slightly driven to defend him while actually working on the case?
I think it goes in a similar way, like for a doctor, for a judge. If you
Yeah.
are detached from the person, if you are detached from feelings, I think you can work better. You can
Yeah.
see things clearly. You can observe things clearly. You can read those things which you otherwise won't.
Yeah.
So I think as a lawyer, it is very important not to feel too much for the client and to be focused on doing your best on the case and on the work that you have to do. Because if you feel so much, then there's a probability that you may leave something in the case.
Clearly. Yeah. Also, now coming on to slightly personal aspect of what you did. So you were also the president of Amnesty International Looms. So and
Yes.
you organize debates on blasphemy law, minority rights, women's rights, and things like that. And I'm sure like such question is of that nature that you might not be very honest about it. But did you ever feel that you had to censor yourself, or that freedom of speech aspect wasn't at its best that it should be?
I think I have no good reason to censor myself here, at least.
All right.
So yes, there were pressures sometimes, and the university administration used to be strict sometimes. They used to say, "Why do you want to debate on this issue? Who are the people you're going to call? What are the things they're going to say?"
Yeah.
There was a lot of that, but I think it was fun dealing with that. It was fun giving a fight for the causes you were
Yeah.
standing up to, and even there was governmental pressure in one of the talks that we were trying to organize that was on the Balochistan issue, and I think we organized a protest at the campus. We also talked to a few politicians who tabled the matter in the Senate. Uh, I also filed a writ petition on that matter before the Islamabad High Court, and I think it is good. Even if there are challenges, even if there are things like that, it is always good to give a fight for the cause you're standing for.
Adil bhai, I think you're quite bold, man. I like genuinely, it's quite inspirational because if I feel something, is controversial in my episode, I just edit it. Yeah, because and I'm really congratulations, and you genuinely deserve kudos. Great job, and that you're doing that. But what are tell me one or two causes that you feel personally about, that you feel all right, this is something that is wrong with my country, I want to change that. For example, I'll give my example. I feel minority rights, I think we need to work very hard for that. I think there is a lot of hatred that is being created. Uh, like that is something that is my core issue that I wanted to focus on this year. So, what are your core issues that you want?
I think the issues like minority rights, women rights. I think in Pakistan there are a lot of people who are doing very good work on these issues,
Yeah,
and we were talking about these issues. And I think the issues I personally want to talk about are
yeah,
and I want to do something about that is about the parliamentary system of democracy and how that can be strengthened in Pakistan. Because you see, in Pakistan, one of the cases for which I also went to the Supreme Court, this was a similar one, where you have these unelected people appointed to the status of Minister of State, appointed to a position of the status of federal minister, which is union minister in
yeah,
India. And I think this sabotages the whole concept of parliamentary democracy, because in a parliamentary
yes,
democracy, the people who run the government should be from the parliament. And if you're going to take the unelected people on all these important positions, who are managing your interior, who are managing your economy, who are managing all the things that are important to your country, who are managing health, who are managing COVID-19, who are managing all these things, if they're unelected and they're not answerable to the people, I think
yeah,
it is, you cannot really call it a good democracy or a parliamentary form of government. And more so when the laws are made by the ordinances and not through the parliament. I think it makes the parliament weak. It makes the parliamentary system of government weak. So
yeah.
these are the issues that I want to take up in my politics and in my career.
I think judicial activism is the strongest form of activism in political scenarios. I think it is more effective than protests, and I think you're doing a brilliant job. And
I
congratulations.
think judicial activism in India and in Pakistan, because the Indian Supreme Court is I think the most powerful Supreme Court in the world. It hears the matters that no other Supreme Court in the world can hear, like the matters that if a constitutional amendment is constitutional or not. And I think the Supreme Court in Pakistan has also
Yeah,
now come on the very same line. Since 2015, there's a case at Supreme Court. There were cases before that as well, but the Supreme Court never went to the extent of uh, uh, sending back a constitutional amendment. But I think now there's a good probability that the Supreme Court might do
yeah,
that anytime soon. But I do see a problem with the judicial activism, because I think that the judiciary, because I think the constitution is a system of checks and balances,
yeah.
whereas the judiciary is only interested in checks and not balances. Yes.
That's a good one. Now coming on to the next segment. Now I want to talk about Pakistani law. We have spoken about law schools and how what is your work, and so tell me. I don't know how to frame this question properly, but I think Muhammad Ali Jinnah gave a speech after Pakistan was formed, and they say, and the crux was essentially that it is an Islamic country, but it is country for all people. You know, do you think that Pakistan is there? I think. Do you think you're not just in the Islamic country, but also a country for minorities? And do you think your constitutional supports that?
I think Jinnah gave a number of different speeches. In one of these speeches, he said that was on 11th August, that you can go to your mosques, you can go to your churches,
Yes.
you can go to your mandirs, and
Yeah.
you're free to do that. No one should. The state has got no business to do now all of that. I think the Pakistani constitution, you have to look at two things: the secular concept of constitution, the way constitutions have been framed all around the world, in United States, for example,
Yeah.
and in other places, from the Government of India Act 1935, which has inspired all the different constitutions of Pakistan in one way or another. And on the other hand, you have to see this Islamic ideal that the Muslims have, and these both things have clashed multiple times in the
Yeah.
courts of this country, and there are some people and religious people who say that the Islamic provisions do take precedent over the secular provisions of the constitution. But then the judiciary has time and again said that we are going to read the law and the constitution with an Anglo-Saxon interpretation, which means that no one provision of the constitution can take over the entire constitution, can be a guiding provision to the entire constitution. We have to read all the provisions of the constitution in harmony. But I think that gives a lot of room to the secular provisions, or to the
Yeah.
provisions that are about uh, human freedoms, human betterment, and human rights. A lot of room in the constitution and in its interpretation.
Yeah, well, I think, but also now coming on to the Shariat aspect, so Shariat is basically is a set of guiding principles, and it has a lot of interpretations, and there are a lot of schools, and those principles have been incorporated in law in different countries. So obviously, so different Middle Eastern countries have different interpretation of Shariat law, and even India has. For example, we had triple talaq, and I'm sure you must have heard, where everyone in India said that Pakistan, which is an Islamic country, doesn't have the concept of triple talaq, but India has that, and I think that, and you feel that I don't know how we ended up with that. So can you tell me that how is Shariat? What's the place of Shariat law in Pakistan, and how is it different from the civil and common law systems?
I think the Shariat law has two main rules in Pakistan.
Or
Firstly, part A, it is very much into the personal laws, the way Muslims will lead the families,
yeah,
the way the families will work, the way inheritance will work. There's Muslim law in that, and then there's Muslim law in on the penal side, a little bit of Muslim law. But I think that should not be of much. People do say, people in other jurisdictions do say that there's a lot of Sharia penal law followed in Pakistan, but I think that is not the case, because we had these four laws, Sharia laws in 80s during the Ziaullah period, but they have never really been implemented, and they have not been implemented for one reason,
yeah,
because the requirement of evidence according to the Sharia is way too high to be
yeah,
followed in any country in this world at this moment, because you have to have four witnesses who are like the absolute perfect people
yeah,
who've done nothing wrong in their life. No one can raise a finger on them. This standard is called Tazkiyatul Shahood. And I think since no one fulfills this requirement of evidence, there has not been a single conviction upheld by the superior courts on the
yeah,
basis of these Sharia laws. So even if there have been few convictions, they have been not upheld by the Supreme Court. So
yes,
I think if we talk about the Sharia aspect of criminal law, I think we can ignore that, because that is not really followed at all, and there are no Sharia punishments in Pakistan at the moment. If we talk about family law and the personal law, I think they are mostly governed by the personal law of all the communities. For Muslims, it's the Muslim personal law. For Christian, it's the Christian personal law. For Hindus, it is the Hindu personal law, which is now developing. So I think the personal matters are dealt with the personal laws of that community, and I think this has been case since the East India Company started
yeah,
taking over different parts of India. They had no interest in getting to the business of personal law, so they allowed people to follow the personal laws, and it is since the case in India and in Pakistan it is so.
that's true. But also heard of something called Islamic Ideology Council, and Federal Shariat Code. Can you elaborate on that? What's the difference?
So these are the two constitutional bodies which look after the Sharia aspect, and they have different duties to do. The the basic responsibility of the Islamic Ideology Council was,
Yeah,
according to the 1973 Constitution, that it has to look at all the laws, and it can then recommend to the Parliament to
yeah,
change if any changes are to be made in any laws. If there is anything repugnant to the provisions of Islam in any law, it can make these suggestions to the Parliament, and then the Parliament can consider if if it wants to change those laws or not, or if
Yeah.
those laws were according to Islamic provisions or not. But then Ziaul Haq came and we got a federal Shariat court, and the federal Shariat court had this extraordinary jurisdiction
Okay.
that it extended the doctrine of Viris to the Sharia law as well.
Yeah.
So now, if there is any law repugnant to the provisions of Sharia law, the federal Sharia court can declare it as not being a law at all and can declare a date from which it will cease to exist. This
Yeah.
is an extraordinary jurisdiction that I think no other courts have in the region. And but I think the federal Sharia court is uh, generally does not get that much of work. And if the government and the senior judiciary has to sideline a judge, he's generally sent to federal Sharia court. There's no much work going on there. There are not many laws being challenged there, and it is only on a standstill. But it has this immense constitutional power.
Yeah. That's true. But I think that's a very good insight about Shariat practice in Pakistan. But now there is some accountability craze in Pakistan law, and many governments have been sent home due to that. Can you elaborate on that? Like, what is the like? I completely understand. I think that is the point that you actually wanted to speak about, and you asked me. So, what is the concept here, basically?
I think the accountability craze is similar in India and Pakistan. I think maybe in Pakistan it is a bit more, and maybe governments have been sent home. But I think there's a similar accountability craze in India as well, especially with the BJP people like Ram Jethmalani and people
Yeah.
like that talking about that we should have to have an accountability with iron fist hands and with iron fist and we used to hold all these corrupt politicians accountable. And even in the recent times, we've seen many arrests in India, like Chadambaramji getting arrested and people like that.
Yeah.
And there is a similar case in Pakistan, but you see, in Pakistan, I think the thing is that your cases only get open when you are in the opposition. When you are in the government, there are no cases against you. But
Yeah.
when you are in the opposition, the cases get open. You are not only out of power, but you're also facing these cases. You also have to go to jail. You also have to do this. But I
Yeah.
think the accountability case worked very good for the powerful people in Pakistan. It has helped them to control the opposition. It has helped them to send the governments home if the government is not working according to them. And I think the judiciary has also played a role on stamping on all those orders where the governments were sent home on the pretext of corruption. But
Yeah.
I think the one recent most interesting thing would be that after there used to be a special power of the to the president
Yeah.
according to Article 58(2)(b) of the Constitution, according to which the president could send a government home if he thinks that the government is not working according to the Constitution and can't run the country according to the values of the Constitution. But many presidents use that power to send governments home on charges of corruption, which were originally not given in the Constitution. And whenever those matters went to the Supreme Court mostly upheld those decisions, those orders of the president, and the government were sent home.
Yeah.
But then the political parties thought about it at length, and they came up with this 18th Amendment, through which that 58(2)(b) was struck out of the Constitution, and it was no more on the Constitution. So I think that was a relief for political parties that now no president can send us home on the charges of corruption. But I think then an interesting thing happened that the Supreme Court it started doing that job on its own. Now it had not to wait for any presidential orders. So first it took up the matter against Yusuf Raza Gilani, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, sent him home on a matter that was somehow related to corruption. Then the Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif was sent home when he was Prime Minister by the Supreme Court. So I think it is an interesting thing to read that how when the 58(2)(b) was taken out of the Constitution, how did Supreme Court increase its power under 184(3) of the Constitution to still manage that the government should be sent home.
Yeah, that's true. But now just talking about Pakistani bar, so we have All India Bar exam to practice in the courts in India. So what are the criteria to just be an advocate in Pakistan?
I think the criteria has been straightened up recently after the orders of the Supreme Court, and now you have to, after you do your LLB,
Yeah.
from wherever you do that, if it is not a Pakistani LLB, you have to do a conversion course, which is of in which you have to read six different subjects of Pakistani law first. Then you have to appear for an exam, and only then you get to the bar. If you are a Pakistani lawyer, you have to appear in this bar and this HEC exam, the Higher Education Commission exam, where they uh, get to know about your knowledge of law, and only once you clear that, you get to the bar. But I think there is still much political pressure from lawyers going on. They want to decrease the numbers uh, that are passing marks. For example, if they're currently 60, the lawyers want to reduce it to 40. So there is constantly that thing going on. But I think the situation has improved in the recent years.
On it. Also, interestingly, it's a very blunt question, but does the bar have enough political traction to act as a pressure group to get a favorable judicial decision in Pakistan? Because in India, it doesn't. I don't think so. But does it? Is the case in?
I think not in the High Court and Supreme Court,
Yeah.
because A, the judges are very strong there. B, uh, there are opposite political groups also present there. But I think in lower judiciary sometimes it is the case that they do have some.
Yeah.
They sometimes do get to use some power. And I think it is a similar case in India as well.
Yeah.
If you look at different the law pages of India, you'll get to see that there are these cases like this that are reported quite often, where in the lower courts,
Yeah.
किसी वकील ने judge को मार दिया and things like that.
That's true, man. That's true. But I must say that we're improving. I think both the countries are. But can you just give in probably a minute? Can you explain the structure of courts in Pakistan? So you have High Court, Supreme Court, and like what are the different levels of courts we have? For example, India has higher judiciary, which is Supreme Court, High Court. Then we have lower courts like for civil side, criminal side, and we have tribunals, a lot of them, to basically that deal with certain types of cases or arising out of a certain act or law. What is the?
I think in Pakistan it is also very much similar. We have like separate three-layered courts at civil side, followed by the superior courts on top. Similar, we have courts on the criminal side, followed by the superior courts on top. And then we have tribunal or special courts. We have lots of special courts, like
Yeah.
special courts that deal with anti-terrorism crimes,
Yeah.
special courts for banking, special courts for IP matters, special courts for accountability matters. We have lots of these special courts, and they're also then on the top of those special courts, there are High Court and Supreme Court as part of the superior judiciary.
Adil, do you think the bar is very political in Pakistan? Because, for example, in India, there are certain lawyers who are active members of political parties and even are ministers at times. But there are certain lawyers that are able to, protect themselves from that political umbrella and then proceed. So, do you really have to be a political person to be a lawyer in Pakistan?
No, I think you don't. There are many lawyers who are very professional, who only work on the legal side and who are not interested in talking on the media,
Yeah.
not interested on doing the politics, meeting the politicians. Once they get a brief, they work on that to do their best, but otherwise they're not interested. But as you were talking about the political side of Pakistani bar, I think there is a very spectacular aspect that I want to talk about, that the role the Pakistani bar has played in Pakistani politics. Since we had consecutive martial laws in this country and successive regimes which were some sort of oppressive regimes which wanted to implement their own rule in the country, could be the oppressing the opposition or oppressing the protests. I think the bar had a very spectacular role. It was always against those oppressions, no matter who is doing it, no matter on what grounds they're doing it. I think the bar politics in Pakistan has given a resistance to every martial law in this country, every oppressive regime in this country, and I think the bar has been a staunch opponent to all those attempts to jeopardize the freedom of public And moreover, if the government is doing something with the judiciary, the bar stands with the judiciary. If the judiciary is going out of its limit against the government, the bar sides with the government. So I think the bar has a very spectacular role on a struggle for democracy in Pakistan, to struggle against oppression.
All right, and I think that's but uh, and one last question about COVID. Then I want to ask you something about your personal experience growing up. So, is the Pakistan judiciary working during the COVID? Like, can you file cases? Can you argue cases? So, I'll tell you what the case in India is. So, we have at the time that we are recording the episode, we have which is on 17th May. We have basically virtual court systems in which only matters of urgency are heard by the higher courts, and obviously they have been expanded and there are certain types of matters that can be heard, and that there is a very good e-filing system that has been launched in which we don't have to go to offices, we can just file from our homes. So what is the system in Pakistan right now?
The system in Pakistan is that we do have the court sort of courts you were talking about at the level of Supreme Court, at the lower level as well, where you can be anywhere and you can address the court. And that was even there in the ordinary circumstances. But I think that has not worked a lot in the COVID times. And the, the courts are working for mainly for two, three sorts of cases: the urgent matters, the civil urgent matters, the criminal pre-arrest, post-arrest bails, and things like that. But I think most judges, the staff is coming to courts regularly, but
Hmm.
the judges they don't want to face the situation, so they are just trying to make sure that not much cases are fixed before them, and they get free early and go to home early. So that is how it is working. As far the filing is concerned, we do have a dual filing system at some jurisdictions where you have to file the file manually as well and an electronic copy as well. But I think that is also the only electronic part has not worked in the COVID times. So the number of cases that we are dealing currently has decreased in the courts,
Yeah.
and there are less lawyers. But in some high-profile cases, it still sucks. I was in a case in the beginning of the COVID situation, and where we were arguing a remand, and it was very difficult to maintain a 6 feet distance with any living room in that court.
uh, Coming on to the last question, I always wanted to ask, in especially the youth of Pakistan. For example, while growing up in India, you know, whatever happens, we still know that we have a prime minister, and we still have a president, and there is certainty of administration. I'm not saying whether that administration is good or bad, but in Pakistan, growing up, and especially the kind of stories you must have heard from before about Miss Bhutto or about, basically Nawaz Sharif and then Musharraf and things like that. How was it, as a child growing up and, okay, things might change and I don't know. What was the sentiment?
I think my most of my childhood was the period where I was getting the political consciousness was in Pervez Musharraf's time,
Yeah.
and it was a pretty stable regime when we come to the uncertainty part, because you knew there's a dictator and you knew that all the dictators before this one have stayed for 10 years, and you knew that this one is also not going to be thrown out for 10 years. But as far as you talk about stability, I think the stability can be bad in a system where you don't know if it is going to be a democracy or martial law, or where you don't know who's going to be the prime minister. Because the administration, which is run mostly by the bureaucracy, remains the same in both the cases. Even if you are changing your prime minister every 2 3 years, like they're doing this time in the UK, or if you get a martial law every now and then, the bureaucracy is going to be the same, and the only thing that is going to be going to change is the government policies. For example, what is the prime minister going to tell to the bureaucracy to work, which projects should they work on, or is it going to be a different prime minister or a chief marshal or administrator?
All right.
But yes, there is this thing with the that the people's voice was not heard, and there was this sentiment among the people that it is not their representation who is ruling the country. So yes, there was that.
All right. And also, one thing that we hear that, Pakistani army is very strong and that people are loyal to the army, not the government.
You need to be scared, Mr. J.
No, well, I don't think so. इधर मेरा अभी भारतीय जाग जाएगा. No, let's not discuss that. But my point is, so basically, is it that Pakistani army as compared to your administration? I'm talking about your administration and your army there, the relationship. Do you feel army can at any point of time, overthrow the government or can control the administration or is very powerful there?
I think army is not going to overthrow the government in coming time. I think the military in Pakistan has learned the lessons that the military in Europe learned after
Yeah.
that Second World War. So I don't foresee any martial laws coming to Pakistan any time in future.
Yeah.
Because I think they've learned the very similar lesson that military in Europe learned after World War II.
Thanks a lot, Adil Bhai. Thanks a lot for coming on my show and actually clearing a lot of confusions or the perceptions that we have about each other's countries. And genuinely, it was a pleasure to have you. And it was just a pleasure. It was a treat to just to speak to you. And you're a very funny man also.
Thank you very much, Jay. Thank you very much for having me over.
मेरे सामने वाली सरहद पे कहते हैं दुश्मन रहता है, पर गौर से देखा जब उसको वो तो मेरे जैसा दिखता है. वहाँ मुल्ले यूट्यूब बैन करे, यहाँ पंडे किसने से घबराए. वहाँ मुल्ले यूट्यूब बैन करे, यहाँ पंडे किसने से घबराए. वहाँ ब्लास्फेमी का फंदा है, यहाँ गाय से कोई न टकराए. यहाँ रात और दिन नेता हमारे, वहाँ फौज का बम्बू रहता है. मेरे सामने वाली सरहद पे कहते हैं दुश्मन रहता है.